Good morning, good morning, morning, good morning, morning.
The members of the media, so I know you might be happy about that. But regrettably, the bills as carried before Parliament this morning did not quite pan out to the expectations of the average Tobagonian. You know, we have been at this for a very, very, very long time. And it seems deliberate that the central government from time to time will just never ever get this right. And I want to explain why we are here, because I expect very much that in the approaching silly season that some silly people will try to spin this all over the place. And I want to have a very frank, perhaps a brutally frank conversation with you.
We're back here on Tobago Updates, here live from Port Mall, Scarborough. To all viewing viewers, thank you so much for staying with us. Now we continue into one of the big, or should I say the biggest topic here being discussed on the island of Tobago, and that is the autonomy bill that was presented in Parliament yesterday to the central government and was rejected. Now a lot of us, from the Chief Secretary's speech or the press conference that he would have had last night, he would have mentioned a few factors that might have been disappointing to him, things that they can do going forward. And we'll be discussing that this morning with Deputy Chief Secretary and the Secretary for the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, Dr. Faith B. Israel. Good morning to you, Dr. Israel.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being with us. Right, I know normally you're here in studio, but it's nice to have you virtually nonetheless. All right, so a lot of Tobagonians may be wondering what exactly was the autonomy bill that was presented in Parliament yesterday. So could you kindly give us a general overview of what that autonomy bill was?
Certainly. So there were actually two bills that were voted on in Parliament yesterday. One was the Tobago Island Government Bill, which in essence is the bill that would have replaced, if it passed, well, it did pass, would replace the Tobago House of Assembly Act. So the act that we currently use to run the island of Tobago, that was one of the Tobago Island Bill. Mm-hmm. But to have the Tobago Island Bill be truly functional, they also needed to pass the Constitutional Amendment Bill. And the Constitutional Amendment Bill, because it is amending the Constitution, which is a huge document, the overarching law of the land, that requires a special majority, and that part failed yesterday. So the Island Government Bill that required a simple majority, meaning one more than half, that passed, but the Constitutional Amendment Bill that required a 3/5 majority, that failed. We need both of them, in essence, for it to move forward in a meaningful way, because many of the things that the Tobago Island Government Bill refers to in its execution or its implementation is hinged on the Constitutional Amendment Bill being passed.
All right. So how would those suggested amendments made be of benefit to the Tobagonians would it have been passed?
Okay, so let me go back a little bit. I'm going to answer your question, and I'm going to do it in a kind of roundabout way. Okay, so many years ago, we're talking about Orville London days, yes. Chief Secretary of London. Just before he demitted office as Chief Secretary, one of the last things he did, and he actually made a big deal about it because he wanted it to be part of his legacy, was send draft bills that relate to Tobago autonomy to the Parliament. So it was sent to the Parliament. The Prime Minister then, coincidentally, was Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley, who accepted the bills and was supposed to take the bills to the Parliament. In 2018, Dr. Rowley actually took bills to Parliament, and he made a big statement about why this was so important. He actually did a very lengthy statement that is on the Office of the Prime Minister's website. And in that statement, he included a very key thought, concept. And I want to read that for you. He included, because he gave a very long history about all of the people who did consultations. You know, we've been doing consultations. We've been trying to get this Tobago autonomy thing right for a long, long time. So he went through that whole history. And then he said, a number of issues were identified as fundamental to an equitable relationship between the two islands in the sovereign democratic nation of Trinidad and Tobago. These were, and here they are: A, equality of status between the two islands and a legislative framework reflecting such equality. B, a federal type system of governance. C, definition and delineation of the boundaries of each island in accordance with the Constitution. And D, the responsibility of the Tobago administration for formulating and implementing policy on all matters affecting the lives of the people resident in Tobago. Those were the things that this constitution amendment should have brought to the people of Tobago. Let me continue with the history. Since 2018, though, we had not, as in Trinidad and Tobago, had not heard anything about these bills until 2021. As a matter of fact, it was in the middle of the 6-6 period in 2021. Remember, we had the January election where we had the tie 6-6, and then we had the December election where we became the executive. So after the January election, we got an email from the parliament indicating that these bills are going forward. We were very excited that they are now before a committee, basically a joint select committee. Again, we were really excited, and that we were invited, because we were members of the Tobago House of Assembly, to be a part of that discussion. Very excited. The day before we actually had that first meeting, we recognized that they sent another email that told us that had an attachment, and the attachment were the actual bills that were before the committee. When we started reading through it, we recognized that there were key shifts, there were key changes between what was sent by Mr. Orville London, between what was laid in the Parliament by the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley. So we now recognize that the documents that were being discussed in the committee in 2021 was different. At that time, we said to the committee, because we attended the meetings, that we are grateful that we are here. Tobago autonomy is a critical issue for all of us, but there are key things that we are not in agreement with in the document that you all are currently looking at. And in the middle of the hoopla, Dr. Maria Dillon Remy, an independent senator back then as well, kind of played mommy to all of us, pulled us all together in a room and had us sit and work through what some of these things were. And when I said all of us, I meant those of us who included Farley and I, who were there. It also included Ansel Dennis and Tracy Davidson Celestine. It included Mr. Hochoy Charles. It included some other people as well who represented other political organizations and NGOs, civil society. In the end, just before we came to a consensus, the PNM pulled out. But we sent a letter to the committee outlining the key things that were critical for the people of Tobago and indicating that these are the amendments we would like made to the document that is before the committee back then. Between then and now, the next thing we heard was that the Prime Minister made the announcement, when was it, a couple of weeks ago, that the Tobago autonomy issue is going to be debated in the Parliament, is going to be brought to the Parliament before the end of this term. Last week, we heard that it was going to be brought before brought on Monday. And here we are. Most of those critical things that we outlined in 2021 were not included in the bills that were put before the Parliament on Monday. And that is why we have a situation now where one bill was passed because it only required a simple majority, but the overarching bill, which is the constitutional amendment bill, was not passed because it did not get the special majority that was required.
Okay. Listening to what you're saying, the work up for this bill being presented in Parliament was a long stretch, right? We're talking about well, you said it was brought to the public in 2020, 2021, and from there you all made, you know, the necessary steps to get it to where it came to last night. So over the weekend, the Chief Secretary would have mentioned you all had to sit down and make those amendments and make whatever adjustments you all had to make before it was presented in Parliament. Now, I looked at the press conference and one person would have asked the question, how is it that you all needed the weekend to put these things together and it has been so long coming? So what actually happened between the announcement of it last Thursday and the presentation of it on Monday?
So because the document that we sent to the committee in 2021, by the way, they did not respond. What we did was, instead of just relying on that document, particularly since they did not respond to even say that they got it. We know they got it because we actually asked a couple of people, hey, we sent all your document, all you get it? And they said yes. So we know they got it. And by the way, if you listened to them in Parliament yesterday, you heard them referring to the said letter that was sent by the Chief Secretary, Mr. 𝐅𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐿, and so forth. You heard them referring to it yesterday. So they got it. What we did over the weekend, though, was look at it again, because we've also, between then and now, we've actually had a committee that was set up by the Tobago House of Assembly, a council that was set up by the Tobago House of Assembly to review these things in details again between 2021 and now. That committee included deceased Mr. 𝐅𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐿, Mr. Alan Richards, and Ingrid Melville, lawyer Ingrid Melville.
Yes.
So because those three individuals have been working on dissecting it and looking at precedents and looking at other areas, other jurisdictions, and seeing what could happen, what we did was basically pull the things that they have been talking about, they have pulled together in a document, really, really quickly, rushedly, to make sure that something could have been submitted to the Parliament on Monday morning. But the reality is, if you read what we sent in 2021 and you read what was sent yesterday, in essence, the concepts are the same. The general ethos is the same. It may have been a little bit of refining of the technical jargon and that kind of thing. But I am not sure what they expected us to do, having learned about this on Thursday for Monday. You really, that was a short time. And let me go back to the fact that there was an entire lull, an entire lapse, an entire dead silence between 2021 and last week. So if the Parliament truly wanted to have a conversation with the Tobago House of Assembly or the people of Tobago about what they were planning to do, that conversation could have happened in 2022, 2023, or early 2024. They did not need to do it the way they did it.
All right. So the next question that follows is now, what would have led the Prime Minister to now announce that date for you all to be present the bill in Parliament? So any idea of what would have happened between then and that day he had announced it?
I think if you go back to all of the times when the Tobago autonomy issue is discussed in the last decade or so, it has always been just before an election. And that is why most Tobagonians, unfortunately, see Tobago autonomy as a political football, because just before an election all the time is when it pops up, and it is never given the true, honest, meaningful kind of effort to really make it work. And we honestly believe, we don't know, excuse me, but we honestly believe that the same thing happened this time again, because we also know that a general election is due any time now, basically.
All right. Okay. So in his press conference last night, he would have mentioned that some of the parts were insufficient to the people of Tobago. Could you briefly give insight to what Tobago's sufficiency would have looked like had the bill been passed?
Okay, so one of the things that we've always spoken about is the fact that if we are defining, so the first thing that Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley spoke about was equality of status between the islands and a legislative framework if reflecting that equality. A legislative framework means you can pass laws. So let me give you an example of one of the things that we highlighted that was deficient. Even though the amendments indicate that the Tobago Island government would be responsible for the island of Tobago, the other little islands around us, and 11 nautical miles, that is miles going into the sea. What we recognize is that they've also outlined items that are responsibility of the THA, or the Tobago Island government, for administrative purposes, and a different list for legislative purposes. So the things we are responsible for administratively, which is basically what we do now, is a very different list to the things that we are responsible for in making laws. And let me give you one critical example. Even though it says 11 nautical miles, when you look at the schedule that speaks about what we can make laws for, marine affairs is not on that list at all. So let's just say we want to do something with the Buku Reef, which is right there, or Nylon Pool. Let's say we want to make a rule that says, you're not supposed to litter out there, or we have to limit jet ski use, or something, whatever it is we come up with. We still did not, or would not have had the authority to make that rule for this thing that belongs to us that we have to take care of. That would have still needed to go to the Parliament. It would have still needed to go to Trinidad and have them make that decision. That does not allow us to show equality of status between two islands, because this is something that affects us and we want to be able to make laws for the thing that affects us. Another critical issue is the fact that what we wanted was a clear definition and delineation, which again is C when you look at the document, when you look at the statement that Dr. Keith Rowley said. A clear delineation of the island of Tobago and the island of Trinidad in this country known as Trinidad and Tobago. Now, the thing is, if we are saying that the country is Trinidad and Trinidad and Tobago includes these two islands, other little islands, and all of this vast water, where beneath the water we have oil and gas reserves, all the way going up to the boundary with Barbados and Grenada and boundaries with Venezuela and so forth. If we say that within Trinidad and Tobago is the island and 11 nautical miles, by deduction, it means that Trinidad is everything else. And that is part of what we have a little bit of challenge with, because I am sure all Tobagonians know that there are oil and gas finds that are within what we would classify as Tobago waters if Tobago was a country all by itself. And you talk about Block 22, people in Plymouth and so forth would tell you about what's happening there, the fishermen. They keep talking now about explanation in the Calypso fields, and the Calypso fields are in the area that is classified as Tobago area. So that also goes to the idea of Tobago not contributing anything to the purse of Trinidad and Tobago, which is not accurate, because when you look at where significant amounts of the oil and gas that we are pulling out of the ground to make the economy of Trinidad and Tobago, a lot of it comes from what would be Tobago if we were a country by ourselves. So part of that delineation, part of that definition of boundaries for both, that clearly shows that we are not just leeching, we are not just stealing, we are not just taking from Trinidad, is part of what was also deficient in the law.
It's a very good explanation as to what would have been expected. Before we take a small break, I just want to give viewers a little highlight of what we can expect when we come back from our short break. That is, well, the Chief Secretary mentioned that there was a suggestion to change from Chief Secretary to Premier, right? But not much people know what the difference between the both would have been, or what would have accompanied Premier had it been changed to Premier. So when we come back, we'll have a short discussion on that. But before we go, viewers, I'll ask you to share the live, share the live, share the live.
Good morning, morning.
just a few minutes to 8. We are here on our morning show here at Tobago Updates with discussions ongoing about the failed autonomy bill at Parliament yesterday with Deputy Chief Secretary and Secretary for the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, Dr. Faith B. 𝐅𝐴𝐺𝐲. Good morning again to you, Dr. 𝐅𝐴𝐺𝐲. We continue on into this very interesting conversation. I know I would have left you on a very high cliffhanger because a lot of people might have want to hear, the answer to that before we took the break. But we are back, and I hope those who would have wanted that answer are here with us still. And also viewers, thank you for staying with us. Now, what is the difference between Premier and Chief Secretary? What would be the differences that would have been made had this title been accepted by the Tobago people?
This was one of the most disappointing things about yesterday, because I was listening yesterday, and when I heard them refer to the fact that they had taken into consideration the letters that were sent and the recommendations, I thought, well, yes, we're going somewhere. And then I realized that they had probably taken the thing that was the most minuscule. Premier is just another name. Who a premier is based on the law and is based on what your law says a premier is. It's kind of like the word president. In Trinidad and Tobago, president is a figurehead, but in other countries like the United States, president is the one who actually runs the country and that kind of thing, but it's the same word president. So it really depends on what your law says it is. So the word premier doesn't really mean much, and it is just a name change that is really, in the most part, inconsequential. And excuse me, the reason why that is so disappointing again is because all of the things that we were talking about before the break, those were some of the key critical things that we did not see them include, some of the other changes that we did not see them include, unfortunately. So that is why the Chief Sec said yesterday that, that is really a moot point. Whatever you call it kind of thing, whether it's Chief Sec, whether it's Premier, it's really a moot point. The critical substantive issues, though, are the ones that they actively and purposely neglected to include on behalf of the people of Tobago.
Okay. All right. So we've spoken about what the Chief Sec would have described as a disappointing happening that happened yesterday. All right. So what is next for the THA? What is next to the Tobago House of Assembly? How do you all regroup and reprioritize what you all have to present again? One person would have mentioned to the Chief Sec, and he would have mentioned it in this in the press conference yesterday, and that is that he may not even see this bill make it to Parliament again in his lifetime. So what is next for the Tobago House of Assembly in this regard?
So I would actually reframe it. I would actually ask or say what is next for Tobago. We have recognized that this issue of autonomy seems to only go somewhere when we have a very independent, meaning people who are not part of any of the two major political parties in Trinidad, independent representatives for Tobago East and Tobago West. And that is what we think the people of Tobago need to recognize, because we are here because of Robinson and Murray and so forth. When they went down, they were very independent, critical thinkers that were representing truly the people of Tobago. So we are actually encouraging Tobagonians at the next go around for the general election. So this isn't even a THA issue. This isn't even a THA issue in and of itself. But when you go into the next general election, and the next general election is really due anytime now, actually it can be due literally January morning, February morning, when you look at the timeline that is needed between when it is announced and when the election can happen. When you go to the polls, Tobago, ensure that you elect two people who truly represent Tobago in the Parliament. And we honestly believe that that is the way, because it has been the way in the last two iterations of this Tobago autonomy actually moving a step forward. That has been the only way it happened before. And we think that will be the only way it will happen again now. And again, you have to consider the fact that you need two real Tobagonians to advocate on behalf of Tobago. And let me just use an example that has nothing to do with autonomy. Well, nothing directly linked to autonomy, but why this is critical. This week or last week, the Minister of Finance boasted, and I cringed when I heard him boast about the fact that the government of Trinidad and Tobago, as they were doing the airport reconstruction, that they saved the one area where they had cost savings was in the land acquisition side of it, which is the area where they should have been paying people proper money for their land and for their property, which they took to do the airport expansion. That is the one area, Tobagonians, that they saved money, which means that they actually had budgeted $40-something million more to pay Tobagonians, and they did not. We needed to have Tobago East and Tobago West MPs in the parliament to say to them, no, you all cannot do this to Tobagonians. And those are the critical things that Tobagonians need to think about going forward. So it's not just for the Tobago House of Assembly. We have our internal strategies that we will continue to implement to move this needle. But Tobago, this is an opportunity for you to ensure that when you go to the polls, you elect people who are going to represent you. And at this point, the only option for this at this point is the Tobago People's Party to represent you fully in the parliament as it relates to this matter and other matters that truly affect the island of Tobago.
Now, you would have mentioned as we started that it was 2 bills that were presented and one made it through, and that was the Tobago Island Government Bill. So knowing that this went through and unfortunately the constitutional bill didn't go through, the constitutional part of it didn't go through, would any corrections or compromises be made on that constitutional aspect to have it go through the next time if it has to be presented?
We are ready and willing to have the conversation. We are ready and willing to leave here and go meet them. You all could come to Tobago and meet us. We could go to Trinidad and meet you all. It does not matter. We are willing to be a part of all of that. And that is what we've said from day one. But it is now really up to the Parliament and up to the government of Trinidad and Tobago to decide on whether they want that as well. If you recognize, as much as this affects Tobagonians, and as much as this affects the Tobago House of Assembly, we did not have a voice in the parliament. We did not have a voice in the parliament to be part of the debate about something that is so critical affect us. Now, I understand that the members of the PNM Minority Council, they were in Trinidad yesterday clapping and being happy about what was going on yesterday in the parliament. I understand that they were there, but we were not part of it. We were not integrally part of it. And we are willing, as we've said before, to sit and hash it out. That is why we took the weekend while people were lambing and jamming and going to all of the Christmas parties that it have. We took the weekend to actually go through and refine and reword so that there's actually the document that they got on Monday, by the way. If they simply copy and paste, it will solve all of the problems. It will solve all of our problems.
Okay. All right. So, let's say that it went the way how you all wanted it to go, right? Both bills passed. As you said, you would have wanted 2 good representatives in Parliament yesterday to fight for the people of Tobago. Let's say that had happened and everything came out well for you all. What accomplishments could Tobago do when these 2 bills are passed, when there is autonomy for Tobago? In your view, what are some accomplishments that Tobago can have should these bills be passed together?
So the biggest thing would really have been, well, two areas. One is the Tobago being allowed to have our laws, the laws that we need passed for things that affect us. That would have been one of the biggest accomplishments. Right now, for us to pass a law, we can't pass a law in the Tobago House of Assembly. What we could debate in the THA is a THA bill, and then when that is passed in THA, it then needs to go to the cabinet. the cabinet, and not even parliament. It needs to go to the cabinet, and then the cabinet will determine whether it comes to the floor of the THA. By the way, we actually did this. We tried this in, what was it, 2016, I think, where we actually agreed, while we were members of the minority. I was a member of the minority. We agreed to a marine resource management, again, I am paraphrasing, bill, where we agreed with the members of the opposite side then, and we sent it to Trinidad, and we have heard nothing about it since. So that is one big change that we would have gotten. Now, the other big change, the other big thing that those on the other side are purporting would be an improvement for us is one that I want to take a little bit of time to clear up. And that includes how much money the Tobago House of Assembly would get if this new bill had passed. Okay, they keep saying that if this new bill had passed, the government of Trinidad and Tobago, who is very willing at this point to give the Tobago House of Assembly 6.8% of the budget, because that would be the minimum of the lower level of the range that the government can give the Tobago House of Assembly. Now, they keep touting that, and they keep saying, well, that would be the biggest benefit. But that is actually not really a big benefit, because currently, in the current construct of the Tobago House of Assembly, where we have the Dispute Resolution Commission saying to the government of Trinidad and Tobago that you are supposed to give Tobago between 4.03 and 6.9, if the government of Trinidad and Tobago, as they claim, really wanted to give Tobago 6.8%, the current legislative framework allows for it. So even though they have been trying to tell people that this is something new and this is something great that we would be getting, it is not something new and something great, because they have the authority to do it right now if they really wanted to do it. But the fact is, they don't really want to do it.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Faith B. Israel, for being with us here this morning. For those of you just joining us, or those of you who might have missed a very informative interview, this was Dr. Faith B. Israel, Deputy Chief Secretary and Secretary for the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, here with us this morning to just speak about the Tobago Autonomy Bill and its rejection in Parliament yesterday. Again, once again, I want to thank you, Dr. Faith B. Israel, for being with us here on our morning show here at Tobago Updates. It's always a pleasure to have you. All right, so viewers, thank you so much. So viewers, as we continue on our program, we bring an end to our morning show. I know a lot of you all would have had to get to work for 8 o'clock, and I really do hope you were on time. As we go forward in our day, I wish you all the best. I wish you success in all that you do. And I ask you to stay tuned and share the live as we come back to head straight into GMT Good Morning Tobago with Miss Chanel Felix.